Good morning. I don't know about you all, but I am extremely excited for this webinar. I spent quite a bit of time this year attending different sessions related to this topic. And I know it's not a topic that is completely new to some of you, but for others, you may think, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm hoping that this can bring some new good information into the state and just something else to add to your toolbox, especially because of kind of our current situation. So my name is Angie McKinney. I recognize a lot of names on here already and happy to especially see my diagnostician cohort. They've been kind of tried and true throughout this last year and a half, I guess. But I'm a consultant with the Indiana IEP Resource Center and have been doing a lot of training around the state on multi-tiered system of support. And what I'm seeing time and time again is the needs are far exceeding the capacity of the school to do interventions. You all are working hard, like super hard all the time to meet the needs of students. So I think it's really important to recognize that kids aren't struggling because teachers and other educators aren't working hard at trying to meet their needs and educate them, which is one of the reasons why I chose this as my background today for my screen. I think it is important that we all take a minute and just recognize that this has been, we think every year at the end of the year, we think, oh, this has been a hard year. I'm ready for this school year to be over. But this is really true this year. It's great that we finally have kids back in the buildings, but that brings with it a lot of challenges too, because kids are coming back from kind of the unstructured, unknown situations. They're coming back with huge gaps in learning. They're coming back not remembering how to self-regulate, not remembering how to walk down the hall. I mean, we have so much that we are relearning. And for some of our kids, some of our youngest kids, they're coming to us with basically no classroom experience this year. So pat yourselves on the back, recognize that you are making a difference, even when it's hard, even when you feel like, I'm only making a dent. That dent is important. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Your microphones are all off by default when you come in. You do have the ability to unmute. We had 190 some people sign up for this. Obviously, there are not that many in right now, but there are a lot of people who just knew I'd like to watch it later. I'd like to watch the recording. So we put microphones off, but I think it's still a small enough group to where if you have a question, you can put it in the chat. You can also just unmute yourself and ask the question. But if you're not talking, please leave it off to cut down on that background noise. Also, we are using the live caption feature. So if you need the captionings or would like to have the captionings, then, and I just lost how to get to it again. Jessica, can you unmute yourself and please tell people how to access the captioning?
Yes, for captioning, you go to live transcript down at the bottom. It's next to the record button. And then you'll hit, sorry, I already had it on there, show subtitle. It's there's a choice of 3. So if you go to the bottom pane and then it says live transcript, you'll click on that and you can choose show subtitle for the session.
Thank you very much. All right, and I also have Katie Mosley on here with me, who is another one of our consultants. And Katie is going to be manning the chat and running a poll and just being general support for this. So again, if you have anything that you want to bring for the good of the group, add that to the chat. All right, so I put this up here on our opening screen. Any of you who have attended previous MTSS trainings probably have this Padlet, but over time we've been adding new things to it. And a couple of things that I really wanted to point out for this, again, the handout for today is at the very bottom of the first column. So there are other training materials in that column, but this particular one is at the very bottom. And then if you go to the column that says evidence-based practices and assessments, I've also added a link to the Visible Learning website, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. It summarizes John Hattie's work, which is really important for trying to learn what's a good thing to do and what's maybe not so effective. And then if you scroll even further to the right, and you have to drag that toolbar across because there are a lot of columns in this Padlet, there is a whole column dedicated to Tier 1.5. There's also some new things that have been uploaded, particularly focused on secondary schools. So just explore that when you have time. You don't have to do it now. And Katie has put that link in the chat as well. So let's start by talking about the flipped triangle. When we've got a flipped triangle, we've got intense needs. You know, we all have seen the triangle from RTI to PBIS to now MTSS. It's generally been on a triangle model, thinking that the base, the majority of our kids should be doing pretty good with what we give them. And then a handful of kids need a little more. And then a small number of kids at the top of that triangle need some serious, intensive kinds of supports. But when you have a flipped triangle, things are just not in line with what we hope for. And so trying to apply what we know about MTSS or any other tiered kind of system, all of a sudden it doesn't make sense because we're trying our best to use it, and then it just doesn't work because we don't have the capacity, the resources, the staff. So in this case, we would have a majority of our students needing intervention, which just pulls the life out of your resource pool. It could also be that the core instruction that we have at Tier 1 is just not a good match for our students. Not everything that's great is great for everyone. I mean, we can talk about what is a healthy meal, but if I have allergies, that healthy meal is not going to work for me. And so we always have to know who it is that we're working with, who are our staff, our students, our community, our resources, everything that we know about our students and our situation. Or it could be that we have a great program, but we are not implementing it with fidelity. And if that's the case, it's not going to do what we need it to do. It's not going to produce success for 80% or more of our students. It may just reflect learning loss. You know, when our kids come back to us and they have those huge gaps, we have to figure out what to do. And sometimes what we had planned is no longer what is going to work. And we may need to supplement that or do something different in order to meet the needs of students. Or it could have always been flipped, right? Some of you probably work in schools that you think, yeah, it's not COVID. We have always had a lot of students who need some pretty significant support, and we always seem to have more kids needing intervention than not. So what I want you to do first, and it's hard to get interactive with 70 people on here, but we're going to try this. So I want you to look at this next screen and think about, what does your situation look like? Does your school or your district, in some of your cases, does it represent a triangle? If you really put what you know about your students and how they're performing in different areas into some kind of shape, would it be a triangle? Would it be a flipped triangle? Would it be more like a square where you've got pretty much equal numbers of students that are doing well, needing some support and needing intensive support? Or do you have some kind of wonky shape that you can't even put a name to it because, and this is the wonkiest one that I can find, what does it look like? So I'm going to have Katie launch our first poll, I guess our only poll today. You got it, Katie? Okay. So do you look like a regular triangle, an upside down triangle, a square, or something wonky? Give just a few more seconds on this. All right, Katie, go ahead and end that and let's see the results here. Yeah, so you're not alone. Clearly, you're not alone. You know, more often than not, you can see the lowest number is for that regular triangle. I mean, we wish we could all be in that situation, but even before COVID, I think a lot of us would probably think, I'm not really sure that it falls into a triangle. I'm going to stop sharing that. So what do you do? What do you do when your triangle is flipped? Can't really tell you. I mean, this is really the same thing for if you said you had a square or you said you had an unusual shape. It's still the same kind of concept of when things aren't right, we've got to do something different. So the first thing that you can think about is let's look at and strengthen our tier one. And that's always where you go. Anytime that your school is working towards improving MTSS, you want to think about tier one as the most important tier and how can we make that solid, because you can't build on top of a crumbling foundation. So think about strengthening tier one. You could consider some additional data. Sometimes the data that we have tells us we're in a certain state, but it really wasn't the right data, or it wasn't data that was telling us what to do next. You know, we can have benchmarking data all over the place, but it needs to tell us something and it needs to guide us in the right direction. So sometimes we have to collect a little bit of additional data. Look for patterns. Where are we seeing the kids who are struggling most? Is it a particular grade level? Is it coming from certain classrooms? You know, sometimes there are needs in our instructional staff that we need to help build them up so that they can meet the needs of students. But, you know, if I'm having to refer my whole class out for interventions, it could be a problem with some of the instruction that's happening. You may find patterns in your different ethnic groups. You may find patterns in socioeconomic status. You may see girls and boys performing differently. Just look for any patterns that you can find, because then we can start to dig into what might be behind those patterns and how can we remedy that situation. The more we know, the more informed we are when we start to make decisions, rather than let's just throw another program at it. Let's just, you know, get another training or something like that. It's really not the answer. We have to dig into the data and know what that means. And the other option is class-wide intervention. And so we're gonna get really heavy into that right now. If my screen will stop jumping around. Yeah, it just jumped like crazy. Let me start back and make sure I'm where I'm supposed to be. Okay, so let's start with making sure that your tier 1 is solid. So the first thing you do is look at that benchmarking data and see, do we have about 80% of our kids meeting expectations according to the benchmarking data? If not, then we go on to some other questions. First of all, do we have tier 1 practices that are clearly evidence-based? If we don't have good evidence behind them, they're probably not something we should have been using in the first place. And again, that's something that if you start digging into some of those websites that are available on the Padlet, you can see that there are really good practices out there, and there are some that just don't have a lot of evidence behind them. They may have had a darn good salesman who came to the school and said, "Oh, I've got the program for you. I've got the new series that you might want to look at." But if it doesn't have the evidence, then it's not something that we should be even considering. Are we implementing it with fidelity? We may have a great program, but if we are not using it correctly, consistently, with true fidelity, then it's not going to produce the outcomes that it says it should. So rather than just throwing out tier 1, if we can make sure that it is solid, we're doing it correctly, it may take some coaching for some of the teachers to say, okay, let me come in and help you strengthen what you're doing at tier 1 if we're finding it in particular classrooms. And then the bottom line is what we have salvageable? There are times when schools have said, this is it, we're ditching this practice and we're going to bring in something different. But there are also other times when we could make it better by increasing fidelity, by giving some additional support to our instructional staff, by supplementing a program that fills a need that program just really didn't address or have. Are we delivering it with appropriate dosage? So we know that everything that we do tends to be based around those classroom periods or specific guidelines. Like we know in elementary, we need to give 90 minutes of uninterrupted instruction and reading. And so we do 90 minutes. But if our kids need more than 90 minutes, we may need to increase that dosage to meet the needs of our students if the mass of our kids are needing that. But everything else we kind of package into, oh, well, this is a 45-minute period or a 60-minute period. That may or may not be the dosage that is needed for our tier 1 instruction in different areas. So we have to figure that out. Do we need more time? I know some of your schools double block certain things at different grade levels because that is what is needed. And, you know, it's important to recognize that we don't just do it for the sake of doing it, or that always at 6th grade we double block this. It's that we've looked at our kids, we've looked at their needs, and we've determined that that is the appropriate tier 1 instruction. There are also huge issues of equity, and there are always issues related to equity, but particularly now when we start looking at what is going on with our data and with student performance, we can identify some clear issues. One is that kids don't always have the same access to good quality, highly effective instruction. Depending on which classroom I get assigned to, which school I happen to live in that neighborhood in, what my school district has decided will be its focus and what they're using. You know, different kids around the state are not getting the same access. And I'm sure you can come up with lots of examples in your head about how that happens. Now, sometimes with our issues with kids coming back with major learning gaps. We have our screenings now that are showing very high levels of need for intervention. Now, when our needs for intervention outweigh what we have to offer as far as, the staff to even do intervention groups or provide that instruction, sometimes what happens is the schools drop the bar and say, well, we used to give interventions to kids who fell below this percentile, but there's just so many of them now, we're going to drop it even further, and only the lowest of the low kids are getting that support. That's an equity issue. But that's not fair. Kids need to get what they need is the bottom line. And it's hard to say, yeah, well, last year you might have gotten this support, but this year we just don't have it to give to you. We also have sometimes where the screening results that are coming up can end up resulting in over-identifying students for intervention or for special education eventually. And it tends to be our more marginalized populations or minoritized groups. So this is adding to the problem that some of your districts are already trying to address in disproportionality, but it's adding fuel to the fire, because we know that when our kids were getting more virtual instruction, that was not given equitably either. Different school districts had different things to offer. And on top of that, different kids had different home resources. And so, if I had to stay home with a child and could work from home and could provide additional support, that's very different than, a single parent mother or father who had to leave the home to go to work and didn't have internet at home. Or if they did have internet, a kid might have been sitting there but not getting any additional support. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same instruction that was happening for all students. Okay, so it's kind of bad to start on a downer there, but this is all this is reality. This is what is going on. So now let's look at how can we best address that. So if we look at class-wide intervention, some of the benefits are we can reach a lot more students, right? We're not having to shuffle them off to, go down the hall for a room, go out into another room to get your support, walk halfway around the building, wasting valuable instructional minutes to get to where you need to go to be receiving additional support. We reach the whole class at once. So it saves you a lot of time. It saves a lot of resources. It can prevent any future difficulties for students because you're bolstering up those skills that all of our students need. Eventually, it's going to help to reduce the number of kids who need those additional supports. We still are going to have quite a few kids who need that, but this can help reduce that by filling in some of those learning gaps. And it has been shown to give positive effects, not only for students who are struggling, but also for students who are doing well. In fact, you see the students who are doing well, who are making really strong gains by using this as well. And part of it is because it balances a teacher and a learner role, and everybody gets to do everything within these different kinds of class-wide interventions. So historically, we've heard a lot in the past for many, many years about class-wide peer tutoring. And with class-wide peer tutoring, that was kind of they would decide to clean our windows right now, sorry. Class-wide peer tutoring has been around for years. And peer tutoring in general has been a very effective tool for students at all grade levels. Now, we've also heard in many schools of the use of peer-assisted learning strategies. And I think especially a lot of the psychologists who are on here now, you've probably heard of or used PALS in the past. And PALS is a more structured program that uses class-wide peer tutoring and formalizes it in a way that's a packaged program. Now, I don't want to endorse any of the programs that we're talking about. I'm just giving you some examples out there so you can look into some of this. On the Padlet, you will also find that there are some, through the Iris Center at Vanderbilt University, there are some modules that you can go through that kind of teach you the PALS program at different levels. They're a little bit outdated, but it's still the same basic concepts and understanding. And then more recently, Amanda Vanderheyden came out with a program called Spring Math. And I believe it's quite a bit pricier than the PALS system. The PALS system is super cheap, other than if you have training that occurs. So Spring Math is a little different because it is kind of a student by student kind of program, but it's a similar concept. So I want you to just look into those, not necessarily to go out and get either one of them, but just to think about how can I maybe put this together so that it's workable in my district, even if I didn't purchase a program. So generally what you do in any of the kind of situations where you are using class-wide intervention for an academic area is you look at your benchmarking data and you rank order your kids. Now, I'm not saying rank them like this, you're number one, but essentially you are putting them in order of their scores so that you have a running list from top to bottom in your class. Now, if you look at the median score of your benchmarking, and if you've got median scores that are at or above your expected benchmark score, then you're doing pretty good. It's when the median score is below that we ought to consider using class-wide intervention, because that tells you that the majority of your students are struggling with a concept and that it makes more sense to just give support to everyone rather than try to farm out kids into different groups. So take the rank ordered scores, split them in two halves, and then you create partners by taking the top of the top half and the top of the bottom half. And then number two in each half, that's a pair, number three, and so on and so on. The reason that we do this is because you're creating partners that have enough distance between them as far as skill level that it is beneficial to have that partnership, but you're not taking your top student and pairing them with your lowest student in the class, because there's too much distance there between the students, and it makes it more difficult for that lowest student to be able to help the highest student. So you want to create those partnerships that make more sense. When you're doing partner work, the stronger student will always go first. And we do that for a couple of reasons. You do that because you're setting up a model, right? So if I'm a stronger reader and I'm reading with Katie and I read first, I'm giving her a model of what it should sound like so that when she reads the same information, she is able to already have one good model of that as we move to the next one. And she'll have more chance of success in that way. It also makes you, if I'm really not so good at something, I don't want to go first, right? It's an embarrassment kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we're promoting kids to be able to help each other, but also to have the greatest chance of success that we can get. So the stronger student is always going first. There is always a component of teacher modeling and instruction. This is not without instruction, but it is practicing skills that we've already learned in class. But the teacher is going to model how we do this. And it's a very scripted kind of process. So again, even if you're not using PALS or Spring Math or, one of the programs that's already out there, as you create something, it will need to be a scripted, simple kind of process. There's partner practice, and there's always that flipping of the roles of, if I'm the stronger student, I do it first, but then my partner is going to go next, and I'll be a helper in that kind of situation. We use instructional level materials, and if there's a vast difference between the two students, we're going to use the instructional level of the lower scoring student, because both students can be successful at that level. One of the biggest benefits is just so many opportunities to respond. And if, I teach some graduate classes, and I tend to just, you guys are hearing this today, I tend to talk and lecture and talk and lecture. And I have to force myself to stop and say, okay, let's have a conversation now. Because that opportunity to respond in class, to have my voice heard, to be able to make mistakes if I need to and get correction on those mistakes is so incredibly important. And if we're doing things in partner work where kids can talk and talk and talk and back and forth, interact with the material, having those increased number of response opportunities can help really increase the skill set. There is an error correction component, and the error correction is scripted. And that's an important piece, because we probably all seen situations where kids are helping other kids, but the helper kid is wanting to play teacher and just give answers or give words. I've seen kids reading together, and kids are like, no, that's not the right word. And then they read it for them. Or the same thing when they're working with math, they just give them the answer. I've seen that sometimes in intervention groups from the interventionists too. So I think it's really important that we have a script for kids to follow that tells them how to help their peer, how to correct an error. So for example, within the reading, within PALS, the correction procedure is to say, stop. That word is, and give whatever the word is. Now, what's the word? And have the student repeat it. Good job. Go back and read that line again. So it's not a judgmental thing. Everybody is saying it the same way every time. And so you don't get that wrong, or some kind of feedback that's not helpful. We want this to be a positive experience. And then in pretty much all of the different class-wide intervention programs that are out there or procedures, there's an element of reward. So group contingencies, sometimes the opportunity for classified rewards. If we do some individual goal setting and you exceed your score, or when we start talking about some of the behavioral methods for class-wide intervention, you'll see that really everyone can get rewarded as long as we're all at or below a certain level that we've set as kind of our benchmark. So students are taught any of the terms, any of the vocabulary that they need, and the procedures. And generally, this is a quick process. This is usually day one of, here's how this works, here's how we do it. First we do this, then I set a timer, all of the things that are important in that. And we give explicit instruction and and some practice on giving those corrections. So again, whether it's math, whether it's reading, no matter what you're doing, if there are error correction procedures, then we not only give them the instructions for that, it's helpful to have a correction card, something that they go to and they just read directly off of that. Or at the lower, the lowest levels, then they may have some picture cards that help them remember what to say to their partner. Now, this is always supplemental to the core instruction. So again, if I have 90 minutes of reading, this is an additional, it depends on what you're working on, but it could be just an additional 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so many days a week that we carve out to be able to provide this. But there's no shifting of classrooms. It's just additional time that we're working on something. It gives us more opportunities to practice the skills and more opportunity to get feedback, not only from the teacher, but from their partner, and to give feedback. There's so much benefit in providing feedback to others. Okay, so let's start with a reading example. So within the PALS program, they use a lot of different techniques for increasing reading skills. Now, I want to point out that this is kind of a different way of thinking than when we're talking about designing in tier 2 or tier 3 interventions for MTSS. When we set that up, we want to make sure that we get more and more targeted, right? So we know that we have certain kids in our classroom who are struggling with decoding skills. They should be working on decoding. Certain kids who are working on fluency, so they're working on fluency. Other kids who are working on phonemic awareness, put them in a group that's working on phonemic awareness. Because we are doing this as a class-wide intervention, we are not necessarily always getting down to a particular skill. It works more on fluency and comprehension than anything. But again, you can look at some of the PALS materials that are set up for kindergarten and first grade that may work more on some of the phonics skills, because that's where those kids are, right? And that's what everybody tends to work on, rather than a fourth grader who's still struggling with decoding skills. So that's different. That's a tier 2 or tier 3 situation. But they use things like partner reading, retelling of information, paragraph shrinking, which is kind of a summarization piece, prediction relay, lots of different things that you can work on. And this doesn't have to be reading. Yes, it's to support reading, but you can use these same processes to apply in science class, right? We can take science material or social studies material and do partner reading, do paragraph shrinking, and we're still teaching the same skill and trying to bolster up those reading skills, but using that within the context of different content. Okay, so I want to show you just a quick video here. And this is just a demonstration of some older kids doing some reading.
Randy woke up suddenly from a deep sleep. Outside, the morning light was changing from black to a light gray. Randy felt a scared feeling deep down in the bottom of his stomach. Today was the day for basketball tryouts at Westview School. This was the first year Westview School had a ball team, and Randy wanted to be one of the first players. Randy looked at his alarm clock and saw that the hand pointed to 5 a.m. Randy groaned and turned over in bed. He had to wait 3 more hours until tryouts. When the alarm went off at 6 a.m., Randy got up and got dressed as fast as he could.
Name the who or what.
Randy.
Tell the most important thing about the who or what.
Randy has basketball tryout.
Say the main idea in 10 words or less.
Randy has a basketball tryout at Westview School this morning.
Okay. So in that case, they were doing partner reading, but also doing paragraph shrinking. So with partner reading, she may have been the first student or she may have been the second student. If she had made a mistake along the way, her partner, you can see her partner was following along and watching word by word, so that if she made a mistake, she could use the procedure of stop. That word is, now what's that word? Okay, read that line again. And she would go through those procedures very purposefully. And then at the end, the paragraph shrinking is a summarization kind of process that's getting at main idea and getting at also shrinking down that information. So with paragraph shrinking, you name the most important who or what, and you see that the helper student in that case was prompting her for those things. Tell the most important thing about the who or what, and then say the main idea in 10 words or less. And you saw the girl holding up her fingers. Randy, she's going through, right? Because sometimes when if you ask me to sum up something, I may still go on and on, right? If we can purposefully shrink that down to 10 words or less. And if suddenly I'm out of fingers, I start over and I have to go back down and see how can I combine thoughts into fewer words. That's what helps us kind of shrink that down. So I know that was just a quick video. You can't really tell whether she was the stronger student or the weaker student because we didn't hear the other girl read. But again, by having the procedure where the stronger student reads first, that means that the weaker student actually has a chance to follow along and provide that error correction first too. And then the weaker student reads the exact same paragraph, right? So they've heard it once, and now they have a chance to read it and get any correction as well. So there's so many good things about just getting the opportunity to, number one, read out loud. Number two, read with correction, because when we send kids off to just do silent reading by themselves, we have no idea whether they're reading any of the words correctly. We have some kids who just flip through the book. Sometimes the book's upside down, right? So by having a very deliberate process of being able to practice and being able to get that immediate correction, that we see scores just skyrocketing. And I've started looking through, there's a lot of research in the works, and I've attended quite a few sessions with unpublished data that will be published eventually, and started looking back at what things are published. And they are seeing just tremendous gains for classes that are using this kind of procedure compared to control classes. They are outperforming other groups, both with the students who were already doing okay and the students who were struggling. You're seeing significant gains, and most students getting close to or exceeding the benchmark score that they're shooting for in the first place. So that was just one example. Again, if you go to the Vanderbilt modules that are on the Padlet, you can see things in greater detail about kind of how to do this. Well, come on now. There we go. For math, there are opportunities to work on anything from number recognition to concepts and applications and everything in between. When I pulled the information from Spring Math, and again, not endorsing Spring Math as a particular program, but it's one of the only class-wide systems that I've seen that is already like set up for people. But when I look at their protocols, they use data in a very similar way. They take the data, they match up students based on who's at the top of the top half and the top of the bottom half of students in a classroom. They create those pairs and kids have a chance to work together again on things. This is not new learning. We've learned it. We are not great at it yet. And so we need to keep practicing those things. But it has a very specific script. And I put an example script that they had on their website onto the Padlet as well. So you can see this for yourself. But they have materials that are already constructed in the system. And you make 1.5, this sounds weird, 1.5 copies for each student in your class, meaning if you've got 20 kids, you're going to make 30 copies, right? Because when you're working independently, I need my own, but when I'm working with a partner, the two of us only need one. So that kind of makes sense. So you say, oh, it's time for our math. Let's get together with your math partner, take out your practice materials and have your colored pen and pencil out and show me that you're ready. Right? We've got to have some procedures. So again, this all goes smoothly. We want to save time. We want to save resources. So in this case, they call them workers and helpers as they identify who the student who goes first and the student who goes second. Workers, your job is to work as many problems correctly as you can. And as you work, be sure to talk through the problem so your partner can hear and see you solve the problem. One of the things that I hear so frequently is that kids struggle with showing their work. Lots of kids can come up with the answer, but they struggle to show their work. And in the early grades, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but they hit a certain point, usually in middle school, where showing your work is incredibly important because things get more complex and seeing the process that you go through is important for the teacher in order to give appropriate feedback and see where the breakdown is for students. So by having kids talk out loud to each other, here's how I solved it. Let me show you how I solved it. So again, the stronger student is going to be showing the weaker student the way to go about this. Helpers, your job is to follow along, listen, and watch as the worker is working problems. If you see an error, speak up. Say, stop, let's check this one. You should give the worker a hint, point to the exact error, but don't give them the answer. See if the worker can fix the error. If the worker is stuck, give the answer, but solve it aloud so that the worker knows how you got that answer. If you get really stuck, circle the problem and ask me for help. There are a lot of other instructions about how they go through this because most of these are a timed procedure of you go for 5 minutes, I go for 5 minutes, whether it's reading or math or whatever. So what we want to do is make sure, again, that we're following whatever those procedures are so that we're getting the most out of this. That's part of the fidelity of this, is to make sure that whatever procedures are there, we're following them so that we can see, is this intervention having the effects that we're looking for the student? So it has a component where not only are they practicing a certain skill by you do it and I correct, I do it and you correct, and we do that as partners. Then we do some independent work, and then we do some trading and not grading exactly, but marking and trying to help each other figure out where those errors are. So there's multiple steps that are involved in this, but it really does not take up a lot of time for either of these. And we're going to move into a little behavior example next. And really that's not taking up a lot of additional time for behavior as well. Okay, so a couple of examples of class-wide interventions related to behavior. And I think these are particularly relevant right now because I just keep hearing over and over again, these kindergartners, this is the craziest group of kindergartners behavior-wise. You know, I'm hearing stuff across the state from people saying, I don't know what to do. It's not a matter of let's write a behavior plan because I can't write a behavior plan for every kid in my class. We've just got things that we need to work on. And again, when you're looking at your triangle and it's flipped for behavior, social, emotional skills, regulation, whatever it is that you're focused on, then it makes more sense to work on this with your entire classroom. So some of the examples that have some good research behind them and some good potential effects are the good behavior game, which I think a lot of people have heard of, mystery motivator, and just general opportunities to respond or those total participation techniques. Keep me involved. I know some of you had your cameras on at the beginning of the website or beginning of the webinar. And I know for me, when I attend a webinar, if I don't have my camera on, I tend to wander a little bit, right? I'm checking my email while I'm listening, right? I'm listening, but I am not nearly as attentive or put together, I guess, if I don't have my camera on. And so I think some of you may turn yours on as a strategy to make sure that you're sticking with what you need to stick with. I'm not asking you to turn them on now, just saying that I recognize that people have different needs. And for some of our kids, having that constant interaction where I'm part of the group, I'm part of the discussion, I'm part of the instruction, is what they need in order to really gain a lot from it. So let's start with looking at the good behavior game. You can find more information about these interventions from the different websites that are on the evidence-based practices, or I think it's that column on the Padlet. Evidence-based intervention network. You can find some printouts on there. Some are on interventioncentral.org. Yes. Lots of them refer to good behavior game, mystery motivator, things like that. But they have some nice printouts on those that are pretty easy to follow. I can also tell you that a lot of people have made tweaks to these so that they work a little bit differently. There are different variations of these. As you start to search them, you'll find different things all over the internet. So I'm giving you kind of the bare bones of what this looks like. First off, you have to figure out when it's most feasible to play. Now, this is not a game that is played and nothing else is happening. This is something that is overlaid during instruction. So we may say, I think we're going to play this during math today. I'm still providing math instruction. I'm just using this as well. So it doesn't take any additional time. But what they say is you really shouldn't go more than 1 or 2 hours out of your day at absolute maximum, because number one, as a teacher, you're going to get worn out tracking this stuff, right? It's just like collecting behavior for progress monitoring. We don't do it all day, every day. We find some particular times that would be good to collect data, because if we did nothing but collect data all day, we'd need like a personal assistant to make all this happen, So identify some times of when to play. And I would say that if you've got particularly problematic times for certain behaviors, that's a great opportunity to say that we really need to focus on this during this time. You have to clearly figure out what behaviors we're going to be looking at. And this is the one time where they emphasize the negative, right? We always say when you're writing a plan, let's write rules, let's write behavior plans that are all about what do you want kids to do. Well, in this case, it is the opposite, because if we tracked everything we want kids to do, that would be a whole lot harder. So we're looking at those particular behaviors that have been getting in our way. So whether it's, leaving your seat when you shouldn't leave your seat, or talking out, or, whatever it is that is a problem in the classroom. So you identify those and define them. So it's very clear. So there won't be any question if somebody exhibits a behavior of whether it occurred or not. So similar thinking to when you're looking at behavior goals or behavior plans. Then as a group, you need to come up with what might be some of the rewards that your class can earn for these, for minimizing these different behaviors. So you could do daily rewards, you could do weekly rewards. It really depends on, the younger the student is, the less they can wait to get a reward. So you want to make sure and probably do those younger grades at least daily, and then potentially some weekly kinds of things too. You're going to split the group in half, and the team that gets the lowest score, so the fewest number of times that a behavior occurs, gets the reward. Simple as that. But you also want to have a minimum number to say, you know what? Even if your team was not the winner, if you got less than 4 instances of this, you also win, because that's what we're looking for, is to increase or to decrease those negative behaviors for everyone. And you just have to teach it to the class. So again, you're looking at small windows of time to say, this is what we're really focused on now. It doesn't mean that that behavior is not important during the rest of the day. It just means that right now, that's our big focus. And if we can get it under control, then we know you can do it, right? And we're hoping to then get that to generalize. So I know that's really simplifying that down to next to nothing. And you can find a lot more details about the good behavior game all over the internet. But again, no extra time really to make this happen, and addresses all students rather than focusing in on, just 1 or 2 when you've got a larger group of students who are having trouble with the behavior. Mystery motivators, kind of similar. However, with mystery motivator, it's got a little bit more of a layer of complexity to it. So it takes a little planning and arranging to make this happen. But it also adds that element of surprise. And sometimes when you don't know what the motivation is, like if I know ahead of time and you say, well, if you get all your work done today, you can have a Coke at the end of the day. Well, if I don't want a Coke, it's not motivating to me, right? But if you say, if you get all your work done today, you can have what's in the mystery envelope. I'm like, oh my gosh, it could be a paper clip. It could be $100. I don't know what it is, but I want it, right? So having that motivation of not knowing sometimes can be really, really intense for some kids. So again, you got to figure out when to play. With this one, they say a max of 40 minutes a day. Again, you have to kind of customize that to what your needs are. Also think about when would be the appropriate time to make this happen. You may start out with a problematic time. You may start out with a time that's already going well, so that you ensure that you get some rewards happening right away, right? You reward me a few times. I've noticed this in a lot of video game apps, you win the first couple of times very easily, and then they hook you, right? So we want to hook kids on working towards these things. So again, you're going to the target behaviors and the replacement behaviors. So this is what we don't want to see. Instead, we want to see this, okay? And then we've got to also define what that cutoff is of this is what we're shooting for. And then you got to do some data collection at first and say, what's our baseline? Cut that in half. And that's what you should probably start with as far as the first target. And then as things get better, then you want to decrease that so that it makes it harder and harder to get the reward, but still a viable option to be able to get the reward. You want to have some visuals of replacement behaviors around. Make it a focus. Make it something that here is what I want to see in the classroom. Create a reward envelope, right, that has some different options of rewards. So again, working with the students on this is always a good thing. I mean, you obviously have to have the final say on what the rewards can be. But if we have different things in there, then and they've had some input, then it is more rewarding. And they want to know what could be in that envelope. And then you format, you can use a calendar, and you hide certain dates that are reward dates. Okay, so they say you should start initially with about 60% of your dates being designated as mystery motivator dates. Meaning there are some dates that we work on skills, but even if we hit that level, we don't get a reward. And that's an important piece too. You can do this using like the invisible markers that you then can reveal them after. You could, put Post-its over something, but you just have to make sure kids can't get to them and undo them. I mean, there are different ways to do that. You can look up on Pinterest how to create like your own little scratch offs. You can do that too. There are a lot of different ways to do that. But you have your calendar. You teach the process to the students. Again, you're recording the behaviors during that designated time. And then you check the date. Is this a reward date or not? Did we hit that level? And is it a reward date? And if so, you get the reward that's in there. And I've seen people kind of adapt this one in different ways too. I've seen where they've had the reward is known, but the cutoff level for behavior is not known. And so maybe on this date, when we scratch off the calendar date, it says we have to have fewer than 5 of these behaviors. And on another date, it's fewer than 2 to get the reward. So, I mean, just think about how you could take this kind of a process and make it so there's still got that mystery component to it. It's still got some intermittent reinforcement. So it happens sometimes it doesn't. But it keeps us focused on the particular behaviors that are important to making sure that our classroom is a good learning environment. And again, you would use this only when you've got more kids who are struggling with a particular behavior than not struggling. If it's only 1 or 2 kids, it doesn't make sense to use this kind of a process. You would do an individualized plan for those 1 or 2 kids. All right, opportunities to respond. Anytime that you can link in more opportunities for kids to get in there, give their input, the better off that you're going to be. So using whiteboards. So instead of, Johnny, who's always got his hand up, I mean, it's like it's stuck in this position, right? You've always got at least that one kid. Call on me. I know every answer, and he probably does know every answer. And, but the more that we call on Johnny, the less opportunity for calling on other kids. And I may be a kid who I don't want to raise my hand. I don't like to speak in front of other people. I don't like to be called on and think, oh my gosh, what if I get the answer wrong, I'm going to be embarrassed. And there's so many things that go into whether or not I will volunteer to answer. So if we use something like whiteboards, where everybody writes their answer and we all hold it up so that the teacher can see it at once. Everybody participates, everybody responds, everybody is engaged. Not everybody is right, and that's okay. I, as a teacher, could then look around and see, oh, I'm going to have to check in on these two kids because they maybe don't understand this as well. Group graffiti. If any of you have attended our co-teaching training, we usually use a group graffiti as a group process where everybody is involved in creating one drawing or representation of something so that everybody can give their own little piece. And if I'm a kid who doesn't like to talk, I can maybe do some drawing. If I'm a kid who's not good at drawing, maybe I can put some words on there. Or I can observe and just be part of the conversation that I can maybe say, how about you do this? I can maybe be leading something. It's just getting that participation and involvement and engagement that we're looking for. Fist to 5, where, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you believe in that this is correct? And everyone just gives their answers. Quick way of doing that. Vote with your feet. Stand up if you have a red shirt. Stand up if you've ever been to the state park. You know, you get people who can get involved and just by standing and sitting. Lots of different ways, again, that you can adapt all of these different things to, so I won't go over all of them, but just think about the engagement and the connection and the involvement piece that's so incredibly important. Lots of you I know use different kinds of response apps too that, again, get people involved. I mean, when I walk into a class and they're doing a Kahoot quiz, it's fun for me to watch even when I'm not participating. You see the kids are enjoying it. And again, even if they're getting it wrong, they're getting the right answer, right? Because it shows you then what the right answer is. And I think that's an important piece of it too. For those who like the competition, it's a driving force right there. For those who don't, they're not as quick with it and they don't really care, but you can come in anonymous and it doesn't really matter. Poll everywhere. You've seen that probably used in a lot of different conferences and webinars and things that you've been to, a way for people to use a response app. So from their phone or computer, they can give their input so that everybody's contributing to that. Plickers is another one too. And I have used this once, and I think people who get really good at it, it makes for a really good response app for, especially for kids who don't want to actually put their answer on something like a whiteboard. So Plickers is set up where you can print out these response cards and everybody has one that's slightly different. And it actually has a response app on your phone so that kids can see on their individual sheets. Like if you think the answer is A, B, C, or D, you turn it a certain way. And the teacher can just scan with her phone or his phone and quickly get everyone's answers recorded. And it's like exit tickets, right? You get a quick sense of who got it, who didn't, you know, what are the different responses that are coming in. You can create graphs that would show, you know, this many people said A, this many people said B, that kind of thing. But you can do that in the classroom very quickly. And I'm pretty sure it's still free to use. Like you can I printed out my own cards on cardstock and then could use them with a group of people. Think strongly on engagement strategies, everything that you can think of to get kids involved. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough, that good core instruction that's truly engaging is what helps our kids connect to the actual learning. So I won't spend any time on this. I just wanted to show you that, and you'll see that it's in your PowerPoint. All right, let's talk impact now. We do a lot of stuff, and it's important that we do good stuff. I know that's simplified, but that really is, it's the key. We do a lot of things in schools because we've done them for years, not necessarily because they produce good effects. And I think it's really time that we start looking at all of the things we do and saying, is this going to have impact for our students, or is it going to eat up time? Now, sometimes we have things that don't produce a lot of super effects, but we still need them. They're beneficial in some other way, not necessarily in the academic impact way. So I had put that link on the Padlet to John Hattie's work, the visible learning, and instructions in there for exactly how to get to looking at some different effect sizes. So how much impact that we see from different practices. And he doesn't really do research. He does meta-analyses, meaning he looks at tons of other research that's out there to try and get an aggregate of, you know, from all of these different studies, what does this particular practice tend to show? What kind of impact? And so when we get effect sizes that are 0 or even below 0, they actually decrease achievement. So you're going to see some things that decrease achievement that are things like, you know, really negative things that happen to a lot of our kids. And we know that those are bad things. We don't do those things. They are just things that have happened. But then we have a lot of things that in between that 0 and 0.15 level, that's what, if we didn't have a teacher or school, those are probably things that I would get some increase just naturally by maturation, by life experience, all that kind of stuff. We have some other practices between 0.15 and 0.4 that are the things that you can usually get accomplished within a year's teaching. So when you see something in that range, that's typically what we see for students over the course of attending school for a year with a teacher. Now, that's great, but what we're talking about are students who are behind. If your triangle's upside down, 1 year of growth is not going to get us where we need to go, right? We've got to grow more in order to lessen the impact of the learning loss that's occurred. So we want things that are in that zone of desired effects, which is 0.14 or above. We want the good stuff. We want it to have solid impact. So we're going to do a little quiz. And how we're going to do this is just do a waterfall in the chat. So I'm going to flip to a question, and I want you to type either A, B, or C, depending on what you think your answer is. For a lot of you, it's just going to be a guess. I wouldn't know any of these offhand. If you do, I'm going to be like totally amazed. But I want you to think about what the effect size is for particular practices or things that we do. Okay. So as quick as you can in the chat, either an A, B, or C. The effect size of exercise and relaxation. What do you think? Lots of A's and B's. I saw a couple of C's, but I'm seeing mostly A's. All right. The answer is C, 0.26, which is not it doesn't make it a bad thing. It's not causing a negative, but it is certainly not like going to fix the world, right? All right, next one. Effect size of school choice programs. Got a little bit of everything. A's, B's, C's. .12. What is meant by school choice? I mean, there are school choice programs out there. There are choice schools that students can opt to go to a different school. That is a good question, though, Kelly. I think, depending on how it was defined in the research, that could make a difference, whether you're talking about, parochial school, private school, or just choice school, magnet schools. I can't answer that one. Ability grouping for gifted students. Mostly A's and B's. Saw a couple of C's in there. You ready? The answer is 0.30, so B was the correct answer. Still not in that zone of desired effects yet. Still what we would expect for growth in 1 year with a teacher. Effect size for feedback, 0.7, 0.2, or 0.4. All right. A. Feedback is a great one, right? And so feedback as a part of these classroom or class-wide interventions, I mean, that's one of the reasons why that feedback piece is incredibly important, whether it's from your peer, from your teacher, from both. Not just operating in isolation is really important. Phonics instruction. And we know Indiana has a very big focus on the science of reading, and the science of reading is so important. If you've not started looking into that, as well as I would encourage you to go into looking at the science of math. There's been a lot of new information coming out about that. So important to make sure that we've got good, solid tier 1 instruction. 0.7, awesome score. 0.7. So again, I know we're all over the place, but I wouldn't care whether it was an A, B, or C. Those are still showing some really good effects to make sure that we have that phonics instruction component. Scaffolding. Just got a couple more of these. Lots of B's, lots of C's. Thank you guys so much for participating. It always makes me happy. 0.82. Very good. Effect size of homework. Oh, I think you guys got this one. I see lots and lots of A's here, and it's an A. Come on now, we've got to do better. We've got so many practices that just aren't making a solid difference. All right, this last one is an A, B, C, D, or E. What do you think has the highest effect size? The jigsaw method, response to intervention, collective teacher efficacy, self-reported grades, or teacher estimates of achievement? Some C's, a lot of B's. Nice. All right, the answer is C, but it doesn't really matter because these are all super high impact strategies. Every single one of them is showing you some pretty intense growth. These are things that we ought to consider using. I'm just the bottom line. Figuring out how to make these things work is really important. So thank you guys for participating in that. whoop, go back. Why is that going crazy? Okay, so here's just some others. These are some other things that are really good and some things kind of related to what we were talking about today. Peer tutoring, the effect size is 0.53, so it is within that zone. And that's part of the reason why you see kids growing more than they would if we weren't doing class-wide intervention. Behavior intervention programs. And then some of these things, planning and prediction, that tends to be part of what we can do during that class-wide peer tutoring related to reading. Deliberate practice, summarization, doing that paragraph shrinking is an important piece of learning summarization. Classroom discussions, the good behavior game, 0.82 for a very simple kind of process. And then overall response to intervention, which we know is kind of a piece, a part of multi-tiered system of support. Just having a good RTI program and putting that in place, or it's not a program, but a framework, 1.29. I mean, that is amazing. And I have been in very few schools in Indiana that don't have some sort of intervention tiered system that is in place. It's not always where, it's not always where you want it to be, but it's still, it's a start. And for all of us, it's a start and we move forward. So all of the different effect sizes, if you go to Visible Learning, their website, look up John Hattie Visible Learning, and there is a link on the Padlet. If you click then on Hattie's rankings, it will show you just tons and tons of different things and show you the effect sizes of that. And they update it every now and then. They have some older data as they get new research that comes in. They tend to do some updates from that as well. All right, I've been looking for any questions and have not seen questions along the way. So if any of you have any specific questions before we kind of go to this next step, then go ahead and put those in the chat or unmute yourself, either one. So what I would like you to do in the chat, because we know that you could watch this today and walk away thinking, well, that was all right, but you know, whatever. Or you could watch this today and think, okay, we need to do something different. We can do something easily to support more students rather than adding additional staff, adding additional intervention groups, all of that kind of stuff. But then sometimes it just kind of falls flat. So I really want you to do some next steps that help you move this forward. So in the chat, I want you to commit to something that you could do in the next day. And I absolutely mean in the next 24 hours between now and tomorrow morning, something that you could share with a colleague, just one little thing. Thank you, Katie. The list. Most people don't know where to find that. Yes. Partner work. And you all will get the recording for today, and you are more than welcome to share that with colleagues who want to, you know, in their free time, sit and listen to our same discussion. Behavior games. Good. Okay, keep those coming. The next thing I want you to do is think about one idea for how you could use this next year. Part of the reason why I want you to have this in the chat is because you can actually download the chat, any of you, when we get done here. So if you see at the bottom where there are 3 dots within your chat feature, you can click Save Chat, and that will allow you to save just the general, the whole running log of the chat. Awesome. Yeah, the pairing, that was a new one for me too, Louise, that when I first saw some sessions about how they were partnering students, I'm like, wait a minute, that wouldn't you need your strongest kid to help your weakest kid? But then the kids in between, as you would narrow down this way, are like so close together that it wouldn't even make any sense. They'd be about at the same level. All right, awesome. So I added in a couple of resources that you're welcome to look at that were just some of the things I found that were a little more recent for the outcomes of using different interventions for class-wide interventions. So you can look these up if you have any interest. If you struggle to find them, like, if you aren't a member of National Association of School Psychologists and you need to be able to get your hands on this, then just reach out to me and let me know. And I'm happy to send that to anyone that needed it. All right, the last thing that I want to do, well, first, Katie, I know there were a lot of things happening in the chat. Did you see any other questions? Okay. If you would please, this is the first time that we've done this webinar. I anticipate probably offering this a few more times, but I want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of it. So if you would go to the evaluation link, you can either scan the QR code, you can click on the link that Katie has in the chat, or you can type it into your browser. It's very quick. It's our standard eval, but I would appreciate honest feedback. So, if there are things that would make this better, please spell it out. Let me know. You, again, will get a copy of the recording sent to you. And Amanda, the Vanderbilt modules are they're on the Padlet in the column that says MTSS Tier 1.5. You'll be able to find them there. And I put different ones. Now, I want to point out one thing. They have a module on PALS for high school. And PALS used to have like a manual that they would sell particularly for high school, and they stopped doing it. I'm telling you, it's still a great thing to use even at the high school setting, to use the same kind of procedure. So again, even if you don't have the PALS program or Spring Math or anything like that, you can create these kind of procedures to use at any level with any content to better increase those comprehension, reading skills, math skills, and behavior. So just consider how you can do that within your own capacity without maybe having to purchase something. All right, so additional trainings. You're not going to find anything here right now. You will eventually. We'll be posting our offerings that will start, I think, at the end of July and go until the end of September. So for the remainder of our grant, you'll see what we're offering in the fall. That's not come out quite yet. The dates are being finalized and locations and all of that kind of stuff, but keep the link handy because you will be able to sign up for any of those free opportunities fairly soon. Thank you guys so much for participating, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your school year.